So, hi, folks. Got an absolutely amazing guest for you here today. It is Colin Sutton, the senior investigating officer for major cases such as Levi Bellfield and, of course, the Night Stalker. A man who does tours, he's got books out, and is probably the UK's most famous detective. Do you feel famous, Colin?
No, I never feel famous, but yeah, I guess things just happen to me, and I just go with the flow.
Absolutely. How did you feel, though, when they made the TV series about you with Martin Clunes?
Well, I was very pleased because you write a book as your first effort at writing a book, and it ends up that quickly being made into a TV drama was just amazing, and to have an actor of his caliber and talent playing me was a real honour, and he made a superb job of it. He's a very talented guy, and a very nice guy as well.
Did you have to sort of work in conjunction with him, to get for him to get his part right?
Yeah, I mean, we spent probably before the first one, we probably spent about 6 or 7 hours in each other's company, I suppose. We had lunch and we went out for dinner and we sort of chatted. My friends and family say that he did it really well. He got my bits. My only gripe, if you like, was the first one. I thought he was too serious. I'm a bit more light-hearted than that, which is a bit funny considering his reputation as a comic actor.
Yeah.
But he certainly sold it. He really nailed it in the second one. The second one was, I think, a great piece of television. It really was.
Fantastic. So you were 30 years in the police force, and of course you are so well known for the Levi Bellfield and the Delroy Grant. So we do have to talk about those things, and I'm sure you've talked about them a lot. But for viewers maybe who are not too familiar, if we started with the Levi Bellfield, can you just give us a bit of background on that and what type of a guy he was and what were the crimes that he was committing?
Yeah, well, Levi Belfer was just the absolute worst, most evil, most violent, dangerous person I ever came across in 30 years.
Right.
He had a number of, he committed crimes, all sorts of different crimes. He had different sort of strings to his bow, if you like, in terms of criminality. But the big case was due to him attacking women in the street from behind, probably after he'd sort of approached them and tried to chat them up, and they've said no, thank you, or something
Mhm.
worse. Um, and he killed Amelie Delagrange. He killed
Yeah.
Marcia McDonnell. He tried to kill Kate Sheedy. They're the offences for which he got his first set of 3 whole life tariffs.
Yes.
And he also abducted and killed Millie Dowler, and he got
Yeah.
his 4th whole life tariff for that. But he was involved in all sorts of things. He was involved in drug supply. He was involved in paedophilia. He was involved in grooming. He was involved in lots and lots of domestic abuse. Uh, he was just a thoroughly, thoroughly dangerous and nasty person.
And did he try to entice his victims into his car or van? Was it a van that he was going around in?
Well, yeah, van and cars. I mean, he changed
Yeah.
his vehicles like I changed my socks. He yeah he had, I say, several different interests. But one of the things about him that's interesting is that he had the gift of the gab. He could be very charming, and he would try to persuade women to come with him sort of consensually, and quite often he
Yeah.
was successful at that, amazingly. Uh, but it was when they turned him down and when they were rude to him, they triggered him. That's when we think he responded with this extreme violence.
Yeah, it was very shocking. I remember at the time. I mean, women were very worried about their safety and
Oh,
everything.
God.
So, did they draft you in specifically for this, or did you take over the case? How did you get involved?
Got involved because Amelie Delagrange was murdered in August 2004 on Twickenham Green, and
Mhm.
somebody had to investigate it, and they decided it should be me and my team. So we got it. But then when we started looking at the case, we realised that there were all these other attacks. There were 7 of these blitz attacks within 18 months all around Twickenham, the greater sort of area of Twickenham within a few miles radius. And when we identified him as our suspect for killing Amelie, we then realised that we found evidence that he was involved in all the others too, and that was when it sort of mushroomed into the huge investigation that it became.
How do you start a case like that? How do you sort of collate all the information? And I mean, it must be just the starting point must be just huge, mustn't it?
Yeah, I mean it is, but you've got a very good, experienced team of well-trained officers investigating murders. And quite a large team. My normal team size was about 35 or 40 people,
Right.
because we knew that this was going to be a big one, and there was an ongoing danger that he would strike again.
Yeah.
that was doubled really. I had about 80 officers on it, and they've all got individual roles and they know what they're doing, and you brief them, and there's a process and a formula for having meetings and sharing the information amongst the team so that everybody is on board with it and knows what's going on. And it's also, I think, important in that process to make sure that everybody's got a voice as well. Not everyone who leads these teams thinks that way, but I always did, and thought, the best ideas come from the team out there. All I do is kind of set the strategy and hold it together, but they're the ones that solve it. So yeah, I guess, for people, even people who are interested in true crime, who are looking from the outside, think, yeah, that must be a nightmare starting. Where do you start? But
yes,
we're practiced and we're trained and we know what we're doing, and we start methodically, and you go on with it.
Do you have a different, because you've been very successful in this, do you have a different kind of method from other people that stands you out from other people?
On paper, theoretically, no, because theoretically there is a manual and everybody does it the same. But I think the important thing is to realise that if you do everything that's listed in that manual, you get bogged down in things that don't matter. To me, the key to it is knowing what things you don't need to do. If that makes sense,
Yeah.
because and so there's an ability then to sort of cut through all the excess stuff and actually zoom in and hone in on the things that are going to be important. And I suppose that's a skill that you learn by experience, or it's a skill that you've got a particular sort of brain that works that way that is good at it. And I'm probably blessed with that in some ways.
So how did you manage to track him down?
It was CCTV work by the team, really, that saw this little white van that was parked at the green. It's a fabulous piece of work because they were looking through literally millions of frames of CCTV. We seized 2,500 hours of CCTV in the first 3 days, and I had 7 officers going through it, whereas we'd normally have 1 or 2.
Yes.
And they spotted that this little white van was parked next to Twickenham Green just for a short period, for a matter of minutes, but they were the minutes almost certainly when Emily was being murdered. And it was a side of the green where there were no shops. There was no kind of reason for a van to park there for 8 minutes or 6 minutes or whatever it was. And so we started looking at that. And I thought, some people said it was sort of a brave call because I kind of went all in on the van and said, yeah, that's going to solve it for us. I didn't see it like that. I thought it was a no-brainer. I thought if we've got a van there that's parked just for the time when Emily's being murdered, and we don't find out who was driving it, who was in it, it's always going to be an avenue of escape for the defence, even if we solve it some other way. If we don't know who was in that van, then the defence are always going to say, how do you know it wasn't the driver of that van? So we had to find it anyway, in my view.
Yeah.
And it was tough because we didn't have a registration number, and there were about 26,000 of them registered in the country, and we started trying to find them, and it was a real long slog, and it was going to be a long slog. And then really fortunately, we'd had a mobile police station in Twickenham Green just after the murder, and an officer who was in there saw a member of my team who she knew, and she said, oh, there was a woman came in and gave up this guy's name. What happened about it? And he said, no, I don't know. I'll find out, see if we've done anything with it. Well, the thing is that, and this is a horrible window into domestic violence in somewhere nice like Twickenham, we had 129 separate women who nominated 129 separate men to us as possibly being the suspects. And they were all partners or former partners or boyfriends or former boyfriends, husbands or former husbands. And because you only get one person nominating them and no other information, you sort of come to that last. It's not a priority. But because this officer had asked my officer what had happened, we had a look at it. And that person who had been to the mobile police station was Jo Collins. She was a former partner of Levi Bellfield. The man she nominated was Levi Bellfield. So the very first one of those 129 we looked at was our man, which was remarkable luck, really.
Yes.
You need it sometimes.
What did you feel? When did you first meet him? Did you actually meet him in person for the first interview that he had, or what happened?
Yeah, I met him after he was arrested in November 2004 at the old police station at Heathrow, which, like so many, is no longer there. But we took him there because it was close to where he lived, and he was quite rude to me. He swore at me basically, which is a bit odd because I'd never actually met him. But he was in a bit of a, I think he realised he was in a bit of a spot, because it all come on top, as they say, for him, and we hadn't just hadn't just arrested him on a fishing expedition. We had sort of strong evidence even at the time we arrested him, although it took us another 3 years to finally get it to the
Right.
stage where we'd finished investigating it. But
Did you have to release him then after the first interview, or could you keep
no,
him in?
that was the danger. What we'd done was we'd found a crime that he almost certainly could committed, an attack on an au pair near Twickenham Green, and
Right.
we traced her. She'd gone back to Peru, and we actually flew her over from Peru because she said, "Oh yeah, I can pick him out." And the
Right.
plan was to get, if she could pick him out in an ID parade, then we'd charge him with that offence, keep him in custody, and that would give us the breathing
Yes.
space to investigate the murders. But best laid plans and all that, she came
Yeah.
over, but she couldn't pick him out,
Oh, really?
didn't recognise him. So there was a danger then, and there was a real, because we knew he was so dangerous, we knew that if he were to be released, we'd have to put a surveillance team behind him 24/7 to make
Yes.
sure that we were there so he couldn't do it again. And that's obviously a big undertaking and expensive undertaking. We didn't really want to go down that road. But because of some really skillful investigation by members of my team,
Mm.
we found out about a number of offences of sexual assault and assault that he committed on former partners, and they came forward and made statements, and we were able to charge him with those offences. So he actually got charged with 9 offences of rape and 4 of assault on 3 former partners. Really
Right.
serious, serious case in
Yeah.
itself, a really serious indictment. And he's remanded in custody for that. And then that sort of took the pressure off. He was off the street and couldn't do
Yes.
anything else. And then we investigated the murder while he was awaiting trial for that. Well, he was never actually tried for that because every time there are time limits that people,
Yes.
you have to, for custody time limits, they call them, when you have a hearing. But every time the defence said, well, look, we know there's a murder charge coming down the track here. Let's wait and see what happens with that. And so that happened. And then indeed he did get charged with the murders. He gets convicted of the murders and given a whole life or 3 whole life tariffs, which meant that that really serious indictment with those rapes and assaults has
Mhm.
never been before a court. It's just left on the file because, in the scheme of things, relatively, it's not important because of what else he's been convicted of. Because on its own, it was a very serious matter, and obviously a very serious matter for those women.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you feel about him as a person? When you're with him, I mean, do you end up can you kind of separate yourself, or do you end up sort of hating this person because of the horrendous crimes that they've committed?
No, I think looking back, you feel a bit like that.
Mhm.
But when you're there, it's very much, you're doing a job, and the most important thing to remember is no matter what your feelings and your own sort of personal morality and how you feel about what's gone on and what's been done, if you do not do your job properly and professionally, there's a chance you'll get away with it.
Right.
And that's always the backstop, and so you just deal with it. And I say this, people ask me this sort of a similar question sometimes from after the shows and that, and I said, well, whatever you do, if you work in a shop or you're a plumber or whatever job you do, you will come across people that you don't really like and they really piss you off,
Yes.
but you have to be professional and smile sweetly and do your job. And in some ways, that's what we have to do dealing with people like this. You know who they are, you know what they've done, you know how abhorrent the things they've done are, and what you feel about them. But nevertheless, you have to do your job professionally to make sure that they get what's coming to them, I suppose.
How much personal responsibility do you feel? I mean, when you go home and you think, I haven't got this guy yet, I mean, does
Mm.
it gnaw away at you? Because I did see in another interview where you were sort of outside of police hours, almost like staking various areas and things like that, and also other
Mm.
people of your team were doing
Yeah,
the same thing. They were so committed.
yeah, that's true. I mean, you do. It does get under your skin, particularly. I mean, this was we were living for real. That device you always see in drama and fiction, isn't it? Oh God, how long have we got till he strikes again? But that was when you're living that for real, and it's your responsibility to stop it. It
Yes.
does weigh quite heavy on you. And yeah, we were doing long hours at work, but
Mm.
yet on the way home, I'll just give it a couple of hours to see if I can find this van around Twickenham before we identified it. And I'd come across other members of the team doing the same thing. But the funny
Yeah.
thing is, because you'd be a little bit embarrassed to admit to your colleagues that you were that keen on it that you were doing it in your own time. So nobody said a word. Nobody ever said, "Oh, I saw you last night." No, just nobody mentioned it. But there
Yeah.
were 3 or 4 of us that were doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. When the conviction comes in, do the team all have a big party? Do they all? They must be elated.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, um, we the day that he got convicted and got sentenced, we went down to one of the bars near the Old Bailey, and
Mhm.
there was just like everybody there, the whole team, a lot of the victims, even some of the jurors came in, the lawyers, and it's one of the greatest memories I think of my entire life. Really, that you know, this sort of thing you see that I think, oh, that never happens. You see it on TV when they crack a case and the boss walks into the office and they all clap, you know, and applaud and cheer. Well, I actually got that, but it was in a pub near the Old Bailey, you know. But I just think, wow, you know, I never thought that would really happen to me. And it was, and I don't think it was adulation so much for me personally. I think it was more a release of the relief and the elation for everybody that we succeeded. You know, we all knew how important this job was. That's why people on the team said, oh, you know, I'm due to be promoted, but put it off for a year because I want to finish this. And somebody even put their marriage, their wedding back. You know, I mean, it really, people didn't want not to be part of it when we finally succeeded, and you know, they all were. And yeah, it was amazing for us to do that and to feel, you know, that we'd done the right thing and that justice had been served, but also that really, when you think about it, we protected so many people. So many women would have fallen. You know, he was so prolific that so many women and girls would have been victims of Levi Bellfield had he not been put away. And we stopped that on the 22nd of November 2004 when we arrested him. He's not seen the light of day since then. So he's been away, you know, for more than 20 years now.
Has he ever sort of admitted guilt during his time, or helped?
Kind of. He's such an ego. He's such a narcissist that he likes to try to manipulate people, officials, journalists, whatever he can. And so every now and then he'll decide he's going to admit to something and then withdraw it afterwards, and then he'll admit to something else again and withdraw it. And he just, you know, he's got not much else to do really, has he? He's sitting there with nothing to do, I suppose. And he decides it's good fun to toy with people, but of course it just shows his cruelty again, because what he's actually doing all the time is toying with the victims of these people who have been murdered. You know,
terrible. Now
it's despicable.
Because of our sort of time limitations, obviously we do have to go on and talk about Delroy Grant, the Night Stalker, because that was another success. Were you brought in late on that particular one as well?
Yeah, very late on that one. It was literally, I mean, it started in 1992 and it'd been going for 17 years. And it was May 2009 that I got asked to go and have a look for a couple of weeks and see if there's anything that can be done. And I just, because there was DNA, and DNA, you know, has kind of taken over it's everybody's sort of go-to method of solving crime these days. And I'm not sure that's entirely healthy, but that's a whole other story that I won't go into now. But and so I looked at it and just thought, well, is there a way we can do it if we didn't have the DNA? What would we do then? And rather than being reactive and being behind him and following him, waiting for him to make a mistake, which he never made over literally hundreds of crimes, let's try and get there where we think he might offend and sit and wait for him to do it in front of our eyes. And that's what we did. And it was a lovely kind of neat term, because it had been 17 years. And when I finally got my surveillance operation that I wanted, and I had so much help and so much support from everywhere in the Met to get it done. We did it for 17 days, and on the 17th day he came along and he was arrested. So it was a contrast of 17 days against 17 years, which of course the media loved, because they love neat little things like that. But you know, again, I wouldn't. You've got to think about the people that did it. They'd been working in a certain way for a very long time, and I was, you know, so grateful that they got behind me, wanting to change it to a different way of working, and they bought into it and did it, and we succeeded. So, you know, credit to them for not sort of digging their heels in and thinking, who's this idiot who's Johnny come lately, who's got different ideas, you know.
It could be resentment.
There was. Yeah. I mean, there was, because it was a really strange situation, because it was in an area of London where I'd never worked, so I didn't really know anybody. So they didn't really know who I was, other than the reputation. Oh, this is a bloke who led the team that got Bellfield. And I think with that, there's always a danger that people think, oh, he's going to be a bit big for his boots. And I'm really not. I mean, it's not really my style to be big for my boots, but there was a degree of that. And then there's a degree of, you know, I mean, think about it. Whatever you do, if somebody else comes in and rubbishes the way you've been working for the last 17 years and says do it differently, then there's always going to be a bit of friction, isn't there? You know, it's human nature. So I kind of expected that. And in some ways, because I didn't know anybody there, that made it easier for me, because I could sort of just think, well, you know, don't care. You know, I don't care what they think of me. I just want to do the job. And that was that was the main thing for me. I was always so blooming sort of task focused anyway that all that mattered to me was making sure that we solved it and that it stuck, and whatever we had to do that. Then if people were a bit fed up the fact that I was doing it, then it's what was water off a duck's back then, and it is now, sort of thing.
And also, for people who don't know the case, he was raping elderly women. I mean, he was like a burglar, wasn't he? But he was also
Yeah,
subjecting elderly women to sexual abuse and stuff.
yeah, yeah. More than 200 of them, possibly more than 400 of them, over
Right.
the period of 17 years, in their own homes in the middle
Hmm.
of the night. I mean, really
Right.
horrible,
Shocking.
scary, scary stuff. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he didn't kill anyone, immediately,
No.
but there were some old ladies who just stopped living after he'd been in
Yeah.
and whatever he'd done to them, and actually he's responsible for them ending their lives prematurely and inflicting that on people. Youngest victim was 68 and the oldest was 94.
I mean, that's
That's it's yeah, it's just
saw a piece where you met him, and in actual fact, his character was one of being quite genial, wasn't he? And sort of
yeah,
talking cricket and things like that.
yeah. It was
Yeah.
that was the big kind of contrast with Belfield. Belfield was just horrible all the time,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
the people that knew him said to us, "Well, we always knew he was a wrong, and it was just a matter of
Yeah.
time before it all came out." When we spoke to people who knew Delroy Grant, they said, "No, you got the wrong man. He's lovely.
Yeah.
He's a nice bloke. He's
Yeah.
and and he could be. He had a paraplegic wife. He before that he'd been with her. She was a Jehovah's Witness. He'd been out with her knocking on doors. He used to do the DJing and run the barbecue when they had street parties in the cul-de-sac where he lived. He was the pillar of the cricket team and the darts or dominoes team at his pub and all this. And yet he had this other side to him. In some ways, I find that even more sinister that he could turn it on and off. At least with Belfield, you knew where you were, whereas
Yeah.
this guy. And the thing is that conversation we had at 3 a.m. in Lewisham Police Station about cricket
Yeah.
just confounded me. I just thought, wow, this is just bizarre to the extreme.
Yeah.
But again, looking back at it, I realised that I was getting genial, nice life and soul of the party. Everybody loves him, Delroy. Then
Yes.
he was turning on that charm and being absolutely normal and friendly to me. And it was just like a conversation having a bloke in your local pub. It was really friendly. And then you think he's capable of doing all that, and he's done all that, and he's done all that, and it blows the mind.
And he used to undo the window panes and climb into the
Yeah,
apartment. Yes.
yeah. He'd remove a pane of glass hole. He'd take the sort of beading out around the window, remove the whole
Yeah.
pane, and climb
Yes.
in through the window. And then you'd be in bed asleep. He'd do it very silently. He'd sort of sit
Yeah.
waiting for hours in the garden watching and wait until the lights went out and give you an hour to get to sleep. And then he'd be in. And the first that most of the victims knew about it was they're woken up by this man kneeling astride them who sort of shakes them and wakes them up. And how scary is that? And when you're in the 70s or 80s and you live alone, I
Yeah.
mean, it's surprising nobody had a heart attack and died there and then, really, isn't it?
Yes.
They were, and some of them were incredibly tough. They were a different breed. These people,
Yes. Yes.
to they were incredibly tough and told him off and fought back and things like
Yeah.
that. And and in some ways, it's almost kind of heartening to know that people
Yeah.
were still capable of showing that resilience and showing that toughness.
Well, how did you manage to catch him? What was his undoing?
Well, he was too prolific, really. He kept on doing it,
Yeah.
and we were able to do some quite detailed analysis of when and where he offended, and then come up with an area where we thought he's likely to come back and offend again. And we
Mhm.
just ran a surveillance operation there where we were completely unseen. Nobody would know we were there at all.
Yes.
I had two officers in a church spire, things like that, watching.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we just waited for him to come along and do one in that area. And eventually, after 17 days, he did. And he's followed away. He was stopped. And as soon, we had his DNA. He'd left DNA at so many
Yeah.
crime scenes. But he knew that if we didn't have his DNA,
Yes.
then he was safe.
Yes.
But as soon as we stopped him and found who he was and swabbed him and took his DNA, that's it. He was history. He was
Yeah.
always going to go to prison for a long time.
How did the people in the team feel if they'd have been doing it for 17 years and then you come in and it's done
Mm,
in 17 days? Do
mm.
they feel foolish or I mean, was there a resentment? How did they feel, or were they just ecstatic that it had been
It,
done?
By and large, it was the former. It was the latter. By and large,
Yeah,
they were ecstatic and pleased that it was done.
yeah,
And I think everyone thought that to the extent that there'd be no more victims, because no
yeah.
matter what your personal sort of pride or feelings were, you don't want these old ladies being victimised like
No,
this.
no.
There were some on the team that were very loyal to my predecessor, and
Yeah.
for that reason, we're a little bit sceptical about it. And yeah, in many ways, I felt sorry for him, because there was a guy there who's put years and years of his career into one job,
Mhm.
and it never worked out, and he wanted desperately to solve it. Everybody did.
Yeah,
And then sometimes it takes, doesn't it? Sometimes it takes somebody who's not
yeah,
invested, not part of it, to come from outside and look at it from, let's say fresh pair of eyes, but I think it's more of from a fresh perspective, really, to look at it. And sometimes you can go so far down a route that you're
mm,
impossible to turn off and turn back, and I think that's where it was. They'd invested so heavily in doing the DNA. DNA is going to be the way we solve this,
mhm.
that they were almost sort of blinkered to the fact that actually there might be another way without using it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you left. Was there a case? I was hearing that you would like to have done the Madeleine McCann case.
Yeah, I mean,
Would you have
I
come
don't know.
back for that?
No, I wouldn't come back again ever. No.
No.
But yeah, it's just look, it's the greatest mystery of our generation, and
Yes.
I think it's one that deserved investigating properly. And from what I know about the terms of reference and the way that it was looked at over here, I'm not sure that the best job was done that could have been done. And I have to leave it at that. Otherwise, my
Yes.
email inbox fills up with emails written in green crayon. It's sort of like that.
Absolutely.
It's
Well,
one of those cases that really
yeah,
kind of polarizes people,
it does,
and
doesn't it?
people
Yeah. Look,
have very strong views on. Yeah.
I don't want to create any trouble for you
No.
at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, right, Liam.
The other one that we were going to talk about, the Broadwater Farm,
Mm,
that whole thing in Tottenham, and
yeah.
everything. I mean, that was horrific with the death of PC Blakelock, and you were
Mm.
involved in that for a little bit, weren't you?
Well, I was involved in Broadwater Farm, not on that day. I'd actually taken the day off, which was rather fortunate in some ways. I started my policing career at Tottenham, and I when they formed the Broadwater Farm community team in late 1982, early 1983, I was put on it because you had to be not a probationer, and I wasn't. You had to not be a police driver, and I wasn't at that time, and you had to not be able to work in any computers, and I couldn't. And there were only a few of us, so they were the ones, because all those sort of skills were needed elsewhere. They wouldn't
Mhm.
sacrifice us to it, so I got sacrificed. So I worked on there with a partner for a time, and it was grim. It was unpleasant because there was so much hostility
Yes.
towards police on there, and no matter what you tried to do and tried your best to do, it wasn't possible to kind of get over that. And then I was fortunate enough that I passed the sergeant's exam and I got promoted. So I went away and was working elsewhere in central London. But on the day that the riot happened, on the 6th of October 1985, I was on what they called the district support unit, which was like the forerunner of the TSG. We did shields and minibuses full of coppers going to places. And I my carrier, my team got sent down there and were
Yes.
there at the right. But I'd taken the night off to go to some do at a golf club with my then girlfriend,
Yeah.
and kind of got home to hear that it was all on the radio that a policeman had been killed in Tottenham. And of course, I had a vested interest in it because I knew so many people there. I'd
Yes.
grown up as a policeman there, and I'm still in touch with many of them. And there's an awful lot of there's still a lot of bitterness around with those officers because they feel they were let down, and they were, because
Mhm.
it was quite obvious from months in advance that something was going to happen and something
It's
was
like a
going to blow.
tinderbox, wasn't it? It was like a
Yeah,
tinderbox.
yeah, and they would. There was like a big, like I'm now famous for this big red book, I know, that I make all my notes in. We had one of those there, and you'd come off from your tour of duty and you'd write in there like an account of what happened, so
Mhm.
it's passed on to the other officers and
Mhm.
passed on, you hoped, upwards to the bosses.
Mhm.
And that book at that time contained an awful lot of warning from the officers, the
Yes.
PCs that were there on the ground, saying this is going to blow, it's getting worse, we need to do something, we need. And it was just ignored. And then eventually it did happen, and um, somebody wrote in there, an anonymous person wrote in there, you can't say we didn't warn you. So that
Yeah.
was like the
Yeah.
final entry, you know.
Yeah.
And
And
what
then some of the convictions were overturned, weren't they? So did people feel bitter about that, like the Winston Silcott thing and stuff?
Yeah, it was. It wasn't the Mets' finest hour. I think the the motivation, the desire to do something about it and to get justice for Keith Blakelock and the other members of Serial 502 was such that because we were in like doing a dry run on the new Police and Criminal Evidence Act, we didn't actually have to do it by law, but we were doing it so we were practiced when it came in. And somebody made a decision, well, we don't have to do that, we're not going to do it. So they kind of went back to the old ways. And if you just thought about that for 1 second, you think, well, hang on, though, this is, people are going to say, why have you gone backwards? You're doing all these new things which provide safeguards and which benefit the justice and benefit fairness to the suspects. And you've rolled it all back 10 years and doing it the old way again, just because it's a policeman that's been. And when you kind of look at it in that way, you think, well, that was a really dumb move in some ways. So I and that's not being unkind, because perhaps it is being unkind to the people that did it, but their intentions were quite pure. They wanted to avenge their colleague and wanted to do that. And I understand that absolutely, of course I do. But you actually do the best service to your colleague by making sure people are convicted. And if you do something like that, it's always going to be difficult. So, yeah, it wasn't a good time. I'm still trying to find. I know that red book I was talking about got secured, shall we say, by one of the PCs at Tottenham after that, because he thought it would get burnt. Right. And it is still apparently in existence, but it's either in storage or someone's loft somewhere. And I'm actively trying to find it, because if I can find it, then I think I might start doing some interviews with the people who wrote in it, who are still about, that I know, and perhaps we'd have an interesting podcast about what it was like to be on the team on the Broadwater Farm Estate before the riot.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask a couple of other questions. How are you feeling about the police now? Because I think there's a certain level of trust as gone with the police, because they're investigating sort of Facebook crimes and this, that, and the other. Well, what do you feel about that? All of that?
I'm appalled on a daily basis by the sort of things that's going on, and what the problem I have with it, and it's not just policing, it's the NHS, it's education, it's all sorts of public service, is that by and large the people at the sharp end who do the job are the ones who want to do the job, and they go into that line of work, be it medical, be it policing, be it education, because they feel a calling to do something for their community in that respect, and they want to do that. I'm not sure how many police officers who sign up these days actually do it because they want to be going around and arresting somebody for a nasty tweet. That's not what I think most of them joined up to do. And how we've got to the stage where that seems to be more important than shoplifting and theft of phones and stuff like that. And you're bound to get a lack of trust, because people they have their car broken into, or their shed broken into, or their phone stolen, whatever, and can't get anyone to respond. And then they see 6 officers going around to talk to a journalist because she's tweeted something that might or might not be unpleasant. Where are we with that? And I don't blame those individual officers. It's something rotten in the leadership. And I said I was in America. I had fortunate enough last year to go to CrimeCon in the USA, in Nashville, which was a blast. If you ever get a chance to go to Nashville, go to Nashville. But I was talking to an American cop over there, and he said, what's the problem with policing in the UK? And I said, well, yeah, you could do with more money, because all public service could, and it could do with less political interference, definitely. But the real thing I think that makes a difference from my day, from when I joined in the early 80s to now, is that we had leaders then who cared at least as much, if not more, about their team than they did about themselves. And we've lost that somewhere. And because there's so much kind of theoretical, I don't know, accountability, and accountability is good, but everyone seems to be worried about being second guessed on decisions they make. And so that leads to a bit of a paralysis. And so someone, so for example, the edict will come down. Yes, we have to go and talk to these people who have sent hurty tweets, because otherwise they'll make a fuss about it and I'll get in trouble and I won't get promoted because I didn't take it seriously.
How are you with a live audience and everything?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I mean, it's really good because it gives me more time to go into sort of detail
Mhm.
of the cases that you can't do on TV, and I get the chance to meet these people that have been good enough to watch the TV, read my books, and that sort of thing. It's lovely meeting them. It's a favourite part for me is the meet and greet at the end, and
Yes.
yeah, it's. I think kind of speaking in front of people. I guess I had a lot of experience of doing that when I was in the police because I, supervised and led police officers for 25 years or more, and you're always doing briefings and talking at meetings and things like that. So it wasn't so much of a problem. It's it's a little bit kind of scary when you walk out. Like I was at De Montfort Hall in Leicester in the tour, and I sort of casually
Yeah.
asked because I always do. How many we've got in tonight? And they said, oh, just under 900, we think. And you think, geez, that's a big crowd. But when you get out there, it's just the same gig. It's just more people there, so it doesn't bother me.
That's a
I
big
enjoy it.
hall. That's a big hall, that one to Montfort Hall, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it is. I mean, actually, it was nowhere near full, even with that number of
Yeah.
people. But
Yeah.
given the very first one that I did was at my local golf club, where I had about 80 people there. It's quite a big step up, 10 times the number. But yeah, it's been going great. I've really enjoyed it.
And have you had to put together the show? Do you do like a Q&A in it, or what happens?
Yeah, I put it together. I sort of wrote it and decided what cases to talk about and what aspects of cases. So the first half I do two sort of lesser known cases, but they're sort of examples of different sorts of investigation. And it's a little bit less serious the first half, and that was deliberate. And then
Yeah.
the second half we go back to the Levi Bellfield and the Delroy Grant and the Night Stalker
Yeah.
cases, but I don't do the things everybody knows about already.
Yes.
There are aspects of that case that are still, if you dig deeply enough in the book, they're mentioned in there. But I sort of go through those, and by the time I get to the end, it's actually quite serious, and that again was deliberate, But
Yeah.
it's very much I didn't want it to be a criminology lecture. I think if
Mhm.
people go to the theatre, they want to be entertained, and I've tried to do
Yes.
that. And it's we seem to have hit upon a formula that's worked, and people have enjoyed it. I've had some amazing feedback and kind of reviews from people. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's been
So if
very
people want to
successful.
see these tours, the
Mm.
show, where do they go to look? Because you've got some gigs coming up as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I've done 116, I think, out of 133. So I've got a 20 or so left to do.
Yeah.
It's Makings of a Murderer 2. If you just put that into Google, you'll get the
Yeah.
list of where I'm coming up. And I've still, though there's only a few left in some ways, I'm definitely in the home straight.
Yeah.
We're all over the place still. I've still got one in Scotland, one in Wales, one
Yeah.
in Essex, a couple in the Midlands, one up in the northwest at Crewe, some in Yorkshire, York and Bradford, Kendal up in the lakes. So I'm still sort of all over the place. It just means I might not be coming to a town near you soon, but
Yes.
a town not too far away from you soon,
Yeah.
sort of thing. So people should have a look. And the other quite exciting thing is that I've got another tour ready to go and another kind of
Right.
completely different show.
Mhm.
I'm not quite sure yet how that's going to work out, whether I'll be doing that next year or whether it will be in 2027, but there will be another one at some point.